Alright everyone, so let me just double check that everything is working properly here. And it looks like it is. Okay, so today is November day number 9, and for today the theme is something fluffy, and this all has to be done procedurally with nodes. So I'm going to give this a try and see where we can go. So, yeah, so let me just adjust my second screen here. So it'll only take about a second. Okay, and yeah, so I'm going to be creating sort of like a galaxy shader, and this will all be done with volumetric, and I'm going to try to, it's kind of is reminiscent of fluffiness, but yeah, that's the best thing I could come up with, and it's all going to be volumetric. So let's add subdivision in, turn this up to 2, add a cast modifier, and that gives us a sphere, and I'm not going to do anything else with the modifiers since I'm trying to keep this with nodes as much as possible. So now I'm going to just drag, well, first of all I got to save this, and let's just call it Nodevember day number 9. Save blend file. Okay, and now I'm going to open up a new window from the bottom here, and that will be the shader editor. So I'm going to be using cycles, so let's set this to cycles, use GPU, make sure optics is enabled. Yes, it is. Okay, everything should be good. And yeah, so yeah, let's add, first of all, we're going to be deleting the principled shader because we don't need that. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to add in, let's see, I believe we could do this with volume scatter or the principled volume, but I'm going to try the principled volume, and we'll see what we get out of this. So this has to be plugged into volume, and we could see that we need to add some lighting to our scene here, so I'm going to go to the world, add in the Nishikita, I believe you call it, if I'm pronouncing it right, sky texture, which is excellent. I'm going to turn down the dust a little bit to like 0.25, something like that is good. Bring up the ozone, because I want to actually see the sun. I can't see it right now. I'm going to bring down the elevation a little bit, or maybe leave it. Yeah, there's the sun. It's very hard to see. Let's bring up the size. Still can't see it too well, so I'm going to bring down the dust even more. And there it is. But maybe I'll leave the dust where it was before. And perhaps I could just bring up the ozone all the way up to like 10. Because we gotta remember we're in outer space here, so maybe actually bringing up the altitude would be helpful to kind of pretend this is outer space. But you know what, for now I'm gonna actually just leave it like that. Okay, so let's focus on the shading. So I'm gonna go back to the object and bring up the color, and you can see we just got a general volumetric material here. So I'm going to be doing something like a galaxy, so let's try to add in some noise. And I could just set in a texture coordinate and set this to be object. And you see if we scale this up, we're getting some details. I'm going to just change some of these settings, see where we can go with this. Maybe add in a color ramp. And pull up these values on the left of the color ramp and the right to make things more sharp, and see what we get. Okay, and now you see we're getting some details. So this is just trial and error here. So let's see where we're going here. So maybe bring down the scale to like 5. Perhaps I could also add in a mapping node. And I could always take the Z scale down. You know what? That kind of looks cool. That's interesting. Alright, and now what I could also do is set that to be the density instead of the color, and then I can make that actually emit light. So let's make that something, I don't know, what color is outer space, like I can't remember what you call it, but it's similar to a galaxy, I guess. So maybe I'll bring that to orange, and no, I don't want to do that. Let's see, so we got the emission strength, but actually this should go into the emission strength too. And I could also take in a map range node and change that from 0 to 1 to pull it up all the way up. So now I'm stretching out the values so that we get more dynamic range, basically. And that kind of looks cool. So yeah, I'm just looking up on my second screen what it would be called. This will take me about a minute or so, because there is this thing in outer space, but I just can't remember the name. Hold on 1 second. Oh, nebula. Okay. It's a nebula. Alright. That's what I'm trying to create, a nebula. Yeah, I don't know why I couldn't think of it. Yeah, so let me bring up an image on my second screen. So I just got a reference, actually, because it's much easier to do when I have a reference available. Okay, so I got a pretty good image up. Don't want to bring it up here because I don't want, for copyright reasons, so I'm just going to keep it over on my other screen. Okay, so I think I got it pretty good. Yeah, so I'm going to be creating the nebula. So this actually is not looking correct. So I'm going to bring down the scale actually down to like 1 or 2. And that's starting to look a little bit better. Let's see, what does roughness do? No. So this is a lot of trial and error. That doesn't look bad. And let's take up the scale and then press Control A. And certainly looks interesting. I could bring up the strength maybe, or bring it down. It might be too strong, but I'm gonna leave it. Maybe bring that down to like 25, and then I could also separate these a little bit more. I think something with the lower scale would look better. And I'm going to just drag around this location until I get something I'm pretty happy with. Something like a nebula, sort of. Now, what we can do is we can take some of these values and I can actually create an outline on this, if that makes sense. So, like for example, I could take this, you know what, this map range is actually making things a little confusing, so I'm just going to remove that for now, and I'm going to just turn this one up to like 50. That makes things much easier, although for some reason, that's weird. It should be smooth, but I believe that it just might be too high. Let's see. Maybe dense. Oh, because I had it in density. So I need two color ramps, in fact. This one goes into density, and that one should stay, but then this one can go up to 50, if I'm doing this correctly. And yes, now we're getting something that I'm more happy with, and I could bring this to be a little bit different of a color, something maybe more reddish. But you know what? We need to remap these values for the colors, so I'm going to duplicate the first color ramp, and now is where things get interesting. So what I could do is, for the first color, make it just completely black, but for the second one, I could take this to a dark orange, and then for another one, I could just lighten that up, make it something more like this, and then I can add another one, and then just bring it up to this again, but, whoops, but I can make that more yellow, so that it kind of lightens up as you go along, so it's brighter in the center, and this will go into the color, so this should be working, but it doesn't seem to be. Oh, and of course, mix RGB, and then this has to be multiplied by 50. Yes, there we go. And now you could see that we can adjust sort of the flames, so we can like tighten up these values on the edge, which I'm going to do. What if we delete? No, that doesn't work. So I'm just kind of changing things here. B-spline tends to work better for stuff like this, I found at least. Let's take a look at how that looks, and it's way too strong. That's got to come down. And now I'm going to do something very interesting and actually take the last color stop down to black. And if I just slide that in, something very interesting will happen. I think. Or maybe I'll just leave how this was. Bring this back, and I think the color stop has to go over here. So, you know what, this yellow is too strong. Actually, it might be best not to do it this way. And I'm just going to leave that more of a reddish. Might be too saturated. Or you know what, the emission strength is just too high. Let's bring it down to like, I don't know, 1, or let's see, well actually, this should be black, I believe, if I'm correct, and this should go up to like 50, because we don't want any smoke. We just want it to be pure emission, a pure emission shader, so that's what I'm doing incorrectly, so I got that fixed. Alright, so maybe now will work better, and yes, it seems to be working better now. Yes, that's more what it was supposed to be doing before. Alright, so now it's working as expected. So what I could do is create a new slider at the very end. Bring it to ease. Now, you see you're kind of getting patterns in there, and that kind of looks like a nebula. So let's actually do that more. And we can widen that up. There we go. Now things are starting to get interesting. So I'm basically pulling out the middle of the volumes, if that makes sense. So I'm remapping those color values to be black, and I'm just changing some things around, and let's see what we can do with this. So this is amazing, because look at all this detail you're getting. Oh, that is interesting right there. No simulating, none of that. You don't have to wait for baking time for this to simulate. This is all done procedurally. So actually the world is just too bright. Let's just turn that all the way down, just so we can get a look at the shader. And yeah, this is looking really cool. Let's add in a new color stop. Maybe bring this to blue. But not so sure I want to do that. Wow, look at that. That is definitely interesting. It almost looks like subsurface scattering. But it's all volumetric material. It's pretty amazing. Wow. So I'm just kind of playing around with these settings here and just seeing what looks really cool. Maybe if I set this to B-spline. Nah. I'm just going to leave it on either linear or ease. I think linear is doing a better job. That looks cool right there. And I'm just going to move this value a little bit this way. And now look at all that detail. Wow. That is incredible. And look, now if we start pulling this value in, you see we're starting to get some interesting effects over here. And we could change that color to be something like green. Or we could darken it. We can even pull colors out, but that's not what I want to do with this one. Yeah, and this value is obviously a little bit too sharp. I want a more of a smoother transition. Maybe duplicate the black value, switch it to green, but just make this one darker. Yeah, but it's not really what I want. I think I'm going to get rid of that green. Whoa. What did I do there? Now that looks kind of cool. So you know what? I'm actually going to save this, duplicate that, and just leave it there so I don't lose those settings, because I'm actually pretty happy with this. But I'm just going to go a little bit further. With this, and maybe change the stretch amount on the z-axis. Look at this, if you bring this to like 0, you get columns, and this is basically a 2D texture, but it's actually really cool if you want to create like some parametric geometry. I mean, you can do some incredible things with the workflow like this. So for example, like it was on 0.5, and you could see that if I bring down the thickness, you kind of get an interesting, this could be like cool for an intro effect or something. Very interesting. But I'm just going to leave it back to how it was before. And let's see what that looks like on 1. I mean, I think that looks pretty cool. Could bring in the scale up. And to add even more variations, not that it's necessary, but to add even more variations, what you could do is add something like a Voronoi texture. Mix it in. Yeah, but I'm gonna leave it like that. Yeah, that looks cool. I'm sorry, guys. My microphone wasn't working for a while. It wasn't loud. Um, but yeah, I think that's how much I want to take it. So I'm going to do the compositing now. Um, Perhaps I could bring that down. And let's just go to the camera. That looks very cool. Let's just bring in some blue glow to the back. A little bit. Something like that looks good. Yeah. And let's just move the camera to, or we could just change this X value. Wow, that is very interesting. So, kind of want to bring it so that it looks like a nebula. And this is a very hard decision to make because everything looks good, I mean. Kind of liked how it looked there. Wow, okay. That's perfect. We could zoom out a little bit more. And for renderings, I like to do it in a square, so 2000 or 1500 by 1500 should be good. And I'm going to be putting this file on my Patreon, which the link is in the description. So you'll be able to play around with this blend file and change some settings. Maybe I want to change the design of this a little bit. So, yeah, this kind of looks fluffy, I guess you could say, for November. Maybe I want to take the scale up to 1. Or 0.75. And you know what? Do I want to bring some scaling to it? No. So volumetrics are very underrated. I mean, look at how cool they can look. It almost looks like fake refractions. I mean, it's a very underused feature, definitely. I actually am enjoying playing with volumetric shaders a lot because there's a lot of stuff they can do. I mean, it almost looks, it's just very cool, basically. So let's bring down let's just change some of these settings, like move it around on different axes until I get something I'm happy with. So let's see, am I happy with that? I'd like to get it to cover the screen a little more. But you know what? I think that's pretty good. yeah. I mean, I don't want too much of it because it's just gets to be too much of the shader. So yeah, I think something like that's good. So I'm going to actually do the compositing on this video because I want to show you guys how it's done. So this is going to be rendered, and honestly, the volumetric speed in Blender has been improved so much. I mean, look how quick this is rendering. I mean, I do have an RTX 2060, but this used to take forever. And I think I can even bump up the volume bounces, but for this I'm just going to leave it down. I'm going to remove the indirect lighting clamping because I want to get all of that dynamic range. Now, should I bring up the emission strength? Let's see what happens if I do. So let's say I bring that to 200. Yeah, that's just a bit too much, so I think I'm going to leave it at 50. Maybe even 25. But I think it could go to like, I'm going to go to 35. That should be a good value. And I'm just going to give it a render at maybe, let's see when this noise clears up. Looks like it clears up pretty good around, I don't know, 50 samples maybe. And this could be, this I'll just leave on 256 and give it a render. Now this is going really quick. I mean, I never have known that volumetrics could render this fast. It's pretty amazing. I think the speed has been improved. I remember something like this used to take an hour to render. Now it renders in literally a few seconds. So yeah, let's do some compositing. Go to the compositor. We're not going to do anything super crazy, but we're going to get this to look a little bit better. So, got our image here, get our backdrop. First of all, I always like to add a color balance right there. Bring up the values. But make sure this is always an offset power slope, so you do it with the scene referred workflow. And look at that, just from doing that, everything looks much more vivid. You don't want to go too crazy with it. Let's say 1.5 is a good value. And same thing for the highlights, 1.5 I found is good. So without it, then with. So big difference. You can do some tweaks to the colors here. Like this looks interesting. So you can actually change the whole color if you really wanted to. But I'm going to leave that. Now one thing I wanted to change is this color. So I found that bringing this middle one down to be a little bit more blue gives it sort of a film-like look. So before and then after, it just gives it that nice. It's hard to explain, it just looks better. Same thing with this one. So it gives it some more dynamic look, I guess you could say. And I'm going to add in, let's see, what's the one called? Lens distortion. And I'm going to just set that to be 0.1 for the dispersion. And look at that. But that's too much, 0.02. And I'm going to go a little more crazy with this because it looks really cool. Now this has to be fit, and maybe bring that down a little more. So, yeah, already we got an interesting result. So without it, and then with it, we can also add in glare. Set that to fog glow. and set the size to be 9. Maybe bring down the threshold. Whoa, too much. And now we can look at it before and after. And it adds some of that background glow, which looks very nice. You don't want to overdo it, but it looks nice. Let's add some sunbeams. So I'm going to add in a mix shader and connect the sunbeams to the image. Control Shift to preview it. Bring the ray length to something like 0.1, and then just add that in on top and give it a value of something like 0.25. Let's see what that gives. And already things are looking better, so we can take a look at it without it, and then with it we can also bring the strength all the way up. But let's take up the ray length to like 0.3. Look at that. That looks incredible. But too much. So I never like to go over the top with the effects. It gets to be a little bit too much. So I'm actually going to bring down the highlights a little bit because some of them are blown out over here. So you got to be careful, because if you start layering too many effects that add things, it could get a little bit too blown out, some of the highlights, so you want to watch for that. Let's add some vignette. So to do this, it's very easy. Ellipse mask, and I could just preview that, take the height up, something like point, or just bring it to 1. Same thing with the width, and then all I have to do is add in a blur and set that to fast Gaussian, maybe 100, or maybe more. We could go all the way up to like 800. Too much, 500, something like that's probably good. And now I'm going to add another mix shader and take this, multiply it by that value, and take a look. So before, after, so it adds in a nice vignette effect. Perhaps it's a little bit too strong, so you can bring that down to like 0.5. Before, after. Yeah. Definitely looks cool. Is there anything else I could do? Well, yeah, there's a lot more you could do with the compositing, but it starts to become more complex as you add in more nodes. But yeah, let's see what else we can do with this stuff. So yeah, so what we could do is we could add in some background glow, and this is very easy to do. So to do this, I could add in something like a fast Gaussian, a blur, and just add it there, and set it to fast Gaussian, and maybe bring the blur all the way up to like 500. And now you'll see you get a really blurry image. That is just too much though. Let's try something like 200. Maybe even as low as 200 should be good. So I'm going to add in a mix shader, and then again take the previous image and then add this one on top, and then we can preview what we got. So now we got our background glare added in, and it's just way too intense. So I'm going to bring that down, that value, all the way to like 0.1. I just want it to be subtle, just to add some ambience to the image. Maybe I'll bring up the blur even more to like 300 or even 400. So with it disabled, and then with it enabled, yeah, that looks great. And I think this is where we're going to leave it off today. I could change some of these settings here at the end and bring down the highlights a little more if I really wanted to, but then it tends not to look as interesting. So you could change a lot of these settings, and let's just take a look at the final render in big screen so you guys could see it better. And I mean, look at all that detail, it looks awesome. And the best of all, no simulations are required. No time is required to simulate anything. It's all done procedurally with volumetric shaders, and they're really underused. It's very interesting what you can create using volumetric shaders, and it's just really cool. I've created procedural fire with them before, and it's just awesome. And so, yeah, so we're actually forgetting something, and I have to actually render this again, and I have to enable all these passes, and you will see why. So I'm going to re-render this, and let Blender calculate this all. And this is so I can add in the denoise node, because I forgot to add in the denoise. So now it's just calculating, added in all the stuff, and I think honestly that there's too much effects in here that are just too strong. So maybe bringing down the sunbeams to something like 0.15 would help out. It just never looks good when there's too much going on. I've found, at least. So I'm going to bring that down to like 0.15, and maybe this one to let's see, 0.05. That's the one that's too strong. This one can come back up. So let's see before and after. That looks good. That's better. Let's add in our denoise. And we have to connect diffuse color to the albedo. And see before and after. So it seems like it's a little bit too noisy still. For some reason it has trouble with volumetrics. So I'm just going to bring up the rendering all the way up to 128. And this will take a little bit longer, but it should still go pretty fast. You can see it should only take a minute. So we'll just wait for that. And in the meantime, I am going to be adding this file to my Patreon, this Blender file. So again, you guys can open it up and you guys can use this blend file, and the whole compositor setup will all be included. All the objects will be included. including the volume shader. So that'll be cool. I'm going to be having a lot more videos up soon of some other projects that I posted to my Instagram, which the link to that is in the description. You guys could check those out. I'm going to be posting those projects to my Patreon soon, so that will be interesting. And yeah, so let's just wait for this to render. If you guys have any suggestions, you can add them in the comments. It's not really noticeable. Yeah, I think it's okay. So yeah, this looks great. So this is, I guess, November day 9, which is, what's day 9 again? I gotta look that up. Fluffy. It's fluffy. So yeah, I guess this nebula can kind of look fluffy. I don't know. It's the best thing I could think of. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be making more soon. Subscribe, like the video, check out the Patreon link on Instagram, and yeah, thank you guys for watching. Yeah.